We started our adventure from the Mirkir Taxon, through some windy streets as it was raining, to Arabica Trading House. We were ready to start our cupping and our adventure into coffee. As we entered Arabica Trading House, we were greeted by the owner, Martell. Martell opened up ATH about 6 months ago.
Coffee sensory analysis. Again, today we're going to keep it very brief and very basic for you guys to just kind of understand like the 101 of coffee. A lot of us drink coffee or know of coffee if we don't drink it, but sometimes we don't know exactly where coffee comes from, how it's produced, and how the coffee actually gets to your cup. So this is just kind of a really great way for you guys to be informed. And I'll just kind of start with the process. You see on the PDF that you have, that first photo there that you see on the first page is what we call the coffee bell, right? So coffee has to have the right temperature, has to have the right elevation in order to produce really, really high quality coffee. Most Arabica coffee, which is what we import and sell, usually is grown at an altitude of on average 1,400 meters above sea level. As for Ethiopia and Yemen, it could go up to 2,300 meters above sea level. So, that's very important. You need really good moisture. So that's why within the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn is where you have most of your coffee producing regions. If you look at the map, in Africa, Ethiopia is kind of the home of coffee as we know it. Ethiopia has some of the largest amounts of varieties and cup profiles for coffee. So that's kind of the birthplace. But you do have a lot of large producers here. In South America, Brazil is the largest producer of coffee. On average, it's bringing in about 50 to 60 million bags a year. Which is quite high. The second one is actually closer to you all in Singapore. Does anyone know what the country probably is?
Indonesia?
Close. Vietnam. Say again?
It's roaster.
There you go. So Vietnam is actually the second largest producer of coffee, but they produce Robusta coffee.
Okay.
Right? So it's still part of the coffee production. It's just not a coffee that we purchase. So just kind of talking about that. Next page, just briefly again, as you said, you have a couple scientists in the room, so looking at our coffee periodic table. Arabica coffee, the species itself has probably 5 different species for coffee. Arabica and Robusta are the 2 most produced species. Then you have different varieties within the species. So Arabica coffee, as you see on the periodic table, has a lot of different varieties. Just looking at the list, the ones that are most popular is Bourbon, which is the one I have highlighted in kind of larger letters. Brazil produces mainly Bourbon coffee, right? So it is one of the largest varieties that we use. Mocha coffee, although it's very small, the small letters mean that it's not really produced that much. But we know mocha from the past and with history, right? For Americans and for the West, we used to call coffee Java, right? Or mocha, right? And these are really terms that were used to talk about where the coffee actually came from. So although mocha, the variety itself, is not really produced, mainly just in Yemen and parts of Ethiopia, it was very significant because it was one of the first ports on where coffee was actually exported to other countries. And for many years, Mocha had complete control and monopoly over coffee production. What they would do is when all the coffees would come to Mocha, they would dry them and hull them so that the beans couldn't actually germinate, right? And so that was kind of part of the reason why Mocha, hundreds of years ago was quite significant. Catimor, on the third line there, Catimor is a very popular variety that's used in Central and South America, as well as parts of Southeast Asia. So you have Vietnam, Thailand. They do use some strains from Catimor. Ethiopian heirlooms. I mentioned Ethiopian heirlooms, and I highlight it because Ethiopian heirlooms are very popular around the world. The reason we call them heirlooms is because there are so many different indigenous varieties in Ethiopia that scientists haven't been able to actually categorize them. So if you're getting a Guji coffee, which we just had here for the cup, it could be that that particular lot maybe has 20, 30 different varieties within that particular lot, but it's just impossible at this point to be able to separate them. Whereas in Brazil, you have one distinct variety that pretty much stands alone. And then the last one is Pacas. Pacas is another Arabica variety that is mainly produced in Honduras. And Honduras is a large producer of coffee. Not as much as Brazil, of course, but they do quite well. So as you can see on this list, we probably have maybe 30 varieties here, but there are endless possibilities. And the reason is because coffee institutes around the world are actually creating hybrid coffees, right? So if you look on the periodic table, all of the coffees that are right in the middle are all hybrids. So they were all created inside of a lab, and the reason that they have been created is because unfortunately climate change is affecting smallholder farmers across the world. In East Africa, there's been a lot of drought over the last 2 or 3 years. So that's affected the amount of yields that smallholder farmers have been able to produce. And so because of that, a lot of research labs and institutes have been trying to figure out a way to make resistant coffee varieties. So resistant from disease, that can not take in as much water in regards to trying to conserve some of the resources. So Robusta coffee, which is a species that is mainly your Maxwell House, like these types of coffees. This is Robusta. Sensory analysis, I think the three most important things that you should know for what we do when we analyze new samples that are coming in is that, one, we're determining the sensory difference between the samples, right? So how is lot 1 different from lot 2? The second thing is to describe the flavors of the coffees. So, is it citric? Does it have more red berries? Are there currants? Is it chocolate? These are all kind of flavors that we look for, okay? And then the last is just to determine, is the coffee good? Will we purchase the coffee? Or will we present this to some of our customers? So those are the 3 basic things that we look for. The SCA, which is the Specialty Coffee Association, they have created kind of a cupping form that we use in order to make our notes and point scores for coffee. Mainly, just quickly going through that list, it's fragrance and aroma, taste, aftertaste, acidity, body, balance, uniformity, clean cup, sweetness, defects, and overall. So it's a lot of information to take in, being just an intro course. But the main thing that we're looking for is, does the coffee smell great? Does it have some really nice aromas? Is the body good? Body is the texture. So like, is it oily? Is it flat? Is it very clean in the mouth? These are all things that you'll be able to understand and relate to. Sweetness. Is it sweet? Is it not? And then overall, is it a good cup of coffee for you? All right. Those are the basic things. The other areas are a little bit more specific, and it takes a little bit of time to be able to analyze and take proper notes for that. But what we'll do today is just focus on those 4 things: aroma, body, sweetness, and your overall impression of the coffee. Okay? Just to give you an example of our scoring sheet, this is one example there. Right, so pretty much we go through every single lot, we mark down, we take our notes, we may do it a second time, and then we evaluate our notes together. Usually when we're doing cuppings using the SCA, we don't really discuss while we're cupping, right? Because we don't want to influence the other person, right? So, so we tend to have a recap and talk about our point scores and stuff afterwards. And then that way we can compile it and then come up with kind of our average for that coffee. The coffee is like citrus, like in acidity. What kind of citrus? Is it lemon? Is it lime? Right? If you're thinking about malic acids, right? Is it like an apple peel? Is it stone fruits like peaches, nectarines, plums? Raisins, right? Raisins are quite common that you'll find. Or does it have a lot of body, like rich body, like chocolate or caramel, right? These are all flavors that you'll probably start to recognize. So when you go through the aroma, just anything that comes to mind that this coffee's aroma reminds you of, just write it down, right? Once we do that, we'll actually pour the water, and this is the wet process. So for the wet process, we'll just smell the tops of the coffees to see how they've changed from the dry aroma to the wet aroma. After that time, we'll actually start with the cupping process. The cupping process is very similar to wine tasting. If you've ever did a full wine tasting before, we're not actually drinking the coffees, but we're tasting them. We're allowing oxygen to get into our mouths, and then we're spitting them out, right? So we'll have cups and everything for you. So we'll get started with putting everything up.
Where are we writing down?
So number one, so aroma.
Right. After you cup the cup, between each cup, you're just putting your spoon in the hot water, try it, and continue. Hot water, try it, and continue. The whole process is like that. After you cup it, you can take notes on the wet cup, and this will be your final and main aromas, and you're gonna get each aroma. Definite aromas for each section in the list. You can just follow me.
So this just gives you an example of the types of coffee processings that we have. This one is a washed coffee. These are actually all Colombians. Okay, yeah, so these are coffees that are just coming in from our producers. So this is a washed coffee, so as you can see it's more green and literally clean, right? So the entire bean has been depulped and hulled. With washed coffees, they actually go through a polishing process. So once the coffee has been hulled, it goes through a polisher and makes it really nice and shiny, and this is pretty much what you have. The next one that we have is a honey process. So this is the one where I talked about the grape. So this producer is just calling it a honey. Just looking at it, I think it's probably a red honey. So it's somewhere in the middle. And you can see that there's still skin, or silver skin, that's on the bean. So that's honey process. And then the next one is natural. So again, very similar to honey, but actually all of the skin. So that's a natural.
Expats, thanks so much for listening. If you want more information about ATH and what they do weekly cuppings for free. Contact them for details. They're located just up from Tufan Station, about 600 meters up the hill in the Beyoğlu neighborhood. You can check them out at www.arabicatradinghouse.com and also follow them on Instagram at Arabica Trading House.